The text arrived at 6:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, just as I was microwaving leftover pizza and wondering why my marriage felt like watching paint dry in slow motion. Working late, don't wait up. Laurel's standard message these days, short, cold, efficient, like everything else about my wife lately. I'm Mitchell Avery, 48 years old, and I spend my days investigating insurance claims for Midwest Mutual. I'm good at spotting lies, finding inconsistencies, and following paper trails that people think they've hidden. It's a skill that pays the bills, and apparently one that was about to ruin my life. My wife Laurel works as an office manager for Premier Medical Billing downtown. At least that's what she tells me. Lately, I wasn't sure what to believe about anything she said. The changes started 6 months ago. Subtle at first. New clothes that she claimed were professional upgrades. Late nights that became routine. Phone calls that ended abruptly when I walked into the room. The home office door that suddenly required privacy locks. "You wouldn't understand my world anymore, Mitchell," she'd said last week when I asked about her day. "Things are complicated at work." Complicated. Right. Our son Dylan, 20 years old and still living at home while attending community college, had been acting strange, too. Secretive conversations with his mother, sudden improvements in his financial situation despite his part-time job at a coffee shop barely covering gas money. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I'm not ashamed either. When you're an insurance investigator, you learn that the truth rarely volunteers itself. 3 days earlier, I'd contacted the building owner where Laurel worked. "Professional courtesy," I explained. Midwest Mutual was considering upgrading security systems for our commercial clients, and I wondered if he'd allow us to test some new camera equipment in his building. He agreed. Written permission, everything legal and above board. I installed a single camera in the shared office space where Laurel worked. Nothing invasive, nothing in private areas, just a clear view of the main workspace where employees handled sensitive medical billing information. Now, staring at my phone screen with her latest, working late message, I opened the security app and checked the live feed. The office was dark except for the glow from Laurel's desk lamp. Her silhouette was visible, but she wasn't alone. I expected to see a coworker, maybe her boss, Mr. Stein, who I'd always suspected of being a little too friendly with his female employees. Instead, I saw my son. Dylan walked into frame, closed the office door behind him, and sat down in the chair directly next to Laurel's. Not across from her desk like a normal conversation. Right next to her, close enough that their knees were touching. My hands started shaking. I watched as Laurel turned toward Dylan, her hand reaching up to touch his face. The gesture was intimate, familiar, wrong in every possible way. My 20-year-old son leaned into my wife's touch like it was the most natural thing in the world. I dropped the phone. When I picked it up again, they were still there, still sitting too close, still touching in ways that made my stomach turn and my mind race with questions I didn't want answered. I saved the video file to 3 different locations, then sat in my kitchen for 2 hours, staring at the wall and trying to process what I'd just seen, my wife and my son. The 2 people I trusted most in the world. I always thought the worst thing I'd discover would be Laurel having an affair with some middle-aged accountant. Instead, I got a front-row seat to my own personal Greek tragedy. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I did what I do best. I investigated. By dawn, I had copies of the security footage stored in multiple locations, including a safety deposit box I opened at 6 a.m. when the bank opened. I also had a clear picture of just how deep this betrayal went. Our joint checking account showed regular transfers to Dylan's personal account, amounts that matched his rent, tuition payments, and mysterious cash withdrawals that I'd been too trusting to question before. Laurel had been funding Dylan's entire lifestyle with our money. Money I earned adjusting claims while she played house with our son. At 8 a.m., I called my office and took a personal day. Then I made 2 appointments that would change everything. The first was with Janet Marks, a family law attorney whose reputation for handling messy divorces was legendary in our city. The second was with Dr. Sarah Kim, a therapist who specialized in family boundary violations and trauma counseling. I needed professional guidance before I did something stupid. Because right now, the only thing I wanted to do was drive to that office and confront them both. But that would be emotional, messy, and potentially self-destructive. Instead, I was going to be methodical. Attorney Marks was a sharp woman in her 50s who listened to my story without flinching. I showed her the security footage, the financial records, and the timeline of suspicious behavior. "This is actually more straightforward than you might think," she said, reviewing the evidence. "The financial misappropriation alone gives us grounds for emergency separation and asset protection. The other issue, well, that's a family matter that the courts will want to see addressed through counseling." She explained my options: file for immediate separation, freeze joint accounts, and establish legal boundaries that would prevent further financial damage. The evidence was solid, the documentation was thorough, and my case was strong. "The key is to act quickly and decisively," she advised. "Don't give them time to hide assets or create counter-narratives. Strike first, strike hard, and stay within legal boundaries." Dr. Kim was equally direct, but focused on the emotional aspects. "What you've discovered represents a severe breach of family boundaries and trust," she explained. "Regardless of the exact nature of their relationship, the secrecy and financial deception constitute emotional abuse. You have every right to protect yourself and establish firm boundaries." She recommended immediate separation, individual counseling for all parties, and a clear no-contact period while everyone processed the situation. "Don't try to fix this or understand their motivations right now," she warned. "Your job is to protect your own mental health and financial security. Everything else is secondary." By noon, I had a plan. Attorney Marks would file emergency separation papers that afternoon. The joint accounts would be frozen, with temporary support arrangements that prevented Laurel from accessing our savings. I would retain possession of the house, and Dylan would be required to find alternative living arrangements. The security footage and financial evidence would be submitted to the court as supporting documentation for the separation. No criminal charges, no public scandals, just clean legal boundaries and consequences. I drove home to wait. Laurel arrived at 6:30 p.m., same as always. She kissed my cheek, asked about my day, and started preparing dinner like nothing had changed. "How was work?" I asked, watching her face carefully. "Busy," she replied without looking up. "Mr. Stein had us working on the Henderson account all day. Very complicated billing issues." She was lying so smoothly that I almost admired the performance. "Dylan's not home yet?" "I think he's studying at the library. You know how dedicated he's been to his classes lately." Another lie. According to the bank records, Dylan had withdrawn money from an ATM 6 blocks from Laurel's office 20 minutes ago. I excused myself and went to the home office. Laurel's desk was locked, as usual. Her computer required a password I didn't know. But I didn't need access to her files anymore. I had everything I needed. The process server arrived at Laurel's office at 10:15 a.m. the next morning. I know this because I was watching the security feed from my car parked across the street. Professional curiosity, I told myself. I wanted to see her reaction when her carefully constructed world started falling apart. Laurel was at her desk, probably preparing for another late night with Dylan, when the young man in the cheap suit walked through the office door. "Laurel Avery?" "Yes." "You've been served." I watched my wife's face change as she read the separation papers. Confusion, then shock, then something that looked like panic. She immediately grabbed her phone and made a call. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see her gesturing frantically, her face growing redder with each passing second. The call ended, and she made another one. This time, she was crying. My phone buzzed with a text message. "We need to talk. Now." I drove home slowly, taking the long route through downtown. No need to rush, Laurel would be there when I arrived, and she'd be ready to have the conversation I'd been avoiding for months. She was waiting in the living room when I walked through the front door. The separation papers were spread across the coffee table, and her eyes were red from crying. "What the hell is this, Mitchell?" "It's exactly what it looks like. You can't just file for separation without talking to me first. We're married. We're supposed to work through problems together." I sat down across from her, maintaining eye contact. "Like we worked through your late nights at the office?" "My job requires—" "Cut the crap, Laurel." I pulled out my phone and opened the security app. The footage from 2 nights ago was queued and ready to play. "I know about Dylan." Her face went white. "I don't know what you think you know, but—" I pressed play. The video showed everything. Dylan entering the office, sitting too close, the intimate touching, the obvious familiarity between them. Laurel watched in silence, her hands shaking. "This isn't what it looks like," she whispered. "Really?" "Because it looks like my wife and my son having some kind of inappropriate relationship while spending my money to fund their little arrangement." I showed her the bank records next. Every transfer, every withdrawal, every payment that she'd hidden from me. Dylan needed help with school expenses. I was just— "You were stealing from our joint account to pay for his apartment, his tuition, and his spending money while the two of you played whatever sick game this is." Laurel started crying harder. "You don't understand. Dylan was in trouble. He needed help, and I was just trying to be a good mother. Good mothers don't lock themselves in offices with their adult sons for private meetings. Good mothers don't lie to their husbands about working late. And good mothers sure as hell don't steal money to fund secret relationships." My phone rang. Dylan's name appeared on the screen. "Answer it," I said, putting the phone on speaker. "Mom, what's happening? You sounded hysterical on the phone." "Your father knows," Laurel said quietly. Silence on the other end of the line. "Dylan, you there?" "Yeah, I'm here." His voice was different now, colder. "So what's the plan, Dad? You going to call the cops? Make a big scene?" "The plan is simple," I replied. "You find somewhere else to live by the end of the week. You stay away from your mother during the separation period, and you figure out how to pay your own bills from now on. You can't kick me out. This is my home too. Actually, I can. Check the separation papers. The house remains in my possession during the proceedings. You're an adult, Dylan. Time to act like one." The line went silent. Laurel looked at me with a mixture of anger and desperation. "You're destroying our family." "No," I said, standing up. "You already did that. I'm just cleaning up the mess." The next few days were a masterclass in controlled demolition. I moved through the process with the same methodical precision I used for insurance investigations. Every action was documented, every decision was legally sound, and every consequence was earned. Dylan came home that evening to find his belongings packed and waiting by the front door. I'd spent the afternoon boxing up his clothes, electronics, and personal items. Nothing damaged, nothing missing, but the message was clear. "You can't be serious," he said, staring at the boxes. "Absolutely serious. Your mother and I are separated, which means this house is off limits to unauthorized visitors. Since you're an adult who's been living here rent-free while conducting inappropriate meetings with my wife, I'd say your visitor privileges have been revoked." She's my mother. And she's my wife. Or was, until I discovered your little arrangement. Dylan's facade of injured innocence cracked slightly. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about. I have video evidence of your cozy office meetings, financial records showing money transfers, and a timeline that proves this has been going on for months." I handed him a printed copy of the bank statements with his payments, highlighted in yellow. Rent, tuition, spending money, all funded by joint marital assets that you had no legal right to access. That's called theft, Dylan. Mom was helping me because I was struggling. Mom was enabling you because you were manipulating her. There's a difference. Dylan picked up one of the boxes, his face flushed with anger. This isn't over. Yes, it is. The separation agreement includes a no-contact clause between you and Laurel until family counseling determines appropriate boundaries. Violate that clause, and I'll file for a restraining order. He loaded the boxes into his car and drove away without another word. Laurel watched the entire exchange from the living room window. When Dylan's car disappeared around the corner, she turned to face me. You're enjoying this. I'm protecting myself. There's a difference. Dylan is your son. Dylan is a 20-year-old man who's been having an inappropriate relationship with his father's wife while stealing money to fund his lifestyle. The fact that he's my son makes it worse, not better. Laurel sat down heavily on the couch. You make it sound so sordid. Because it is sordid, Laurel. Whatever you want to call it, whatever justification you've created in your mind, the reality is that you've been lying to me, stealing from me, and conducting a secret relationship with our son. It wasn't a relationship, not the way you're thinking. Then explain it to me. Help me understand why my wife and my son needed private office meetings, secret money transfers, and elaborate lies about working late. She was quiet for a long moment. Dylan was in trouble, real trouble. He owed money to some dangerous people, and he was scared to tell you because he thought you'd be disappointed. What kind of trouble? Gambling debts. He'd been betting on sports through some online sites, and he got in over his head. The people he owed money to were threatening him. I felt a chill run down my spine. How much money? $15,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. I looked at the bank statements again, adding up the transfers over the past 6 months. Jesus Christ, Laurel. $15,000 of our money went to pay off Dylan's gambling debts? I couldn't let them hurt him. So you decided to bankrupt us instead? We're not bankrupt. We have savings, investments. We had savings. Now we have a son with a gambling problem and a wife who thinks lying and stealing are acceptable solutions to family problems. I stood up and walked to the window, trying to process this new information. The office meetings, the secrecy, the locked doors, all of that was about gambling debts? Dylan was ashamed. He didn't want you to know how badly he'd screwed up, and I thought I could handle it quietly, help him get back on his feet without involving you. Without involving me, his father, your husband, the person who's supposed to be your partner in making major financial decisions. Laurel started crying again. I was trying to protect both of you. You were trying to control the situation, and you made it worse. Now Dylan thinks he can manipulate his way out of problems, and you've demonstrated that lying to me is acceptable as long as you think you have good reasons. I turned back to face her. The separation stands, the financial restrictions stand, and Dylan stays away until he gets professional help for his gambling problem. What about us? What about us, Laurel? You've spent 6 months lying to my face, stealing our money, and conducting secret meetings with our son. You've destroyed my trust, damaged our finances, and turned our home into a place where I can't believe anything anyone tells me. People make mistakes, Mitchell. Marriages survive worse things than this. Maybe they do. But this marriage won't survive anything else like this. So if you want to fix what you've broken, you better start with complete honesty and end with concrete changes. What does that mean? It means you get counseling for whatever drove you to think this was acceptable behavior. It means Dylan gets help for his gambling addiction and learns to solve his own problems. And it means you earn back my trust through actions, not words. Laurel nodded slowly. And if I do all of that? Then maybe we can have a conversation about rebuilding something that's worth saving. 2 weeks later, everything went to hell. I was having lunch at Murphy's Tavern, a downtown sports bar, where I'd been meeting my friend Carter twice a week for the past 10 years. Carter was an ex-cop who now worked private security, and he'd been my sounding board throughout the separation process. "How's Laurel handling the counseling?" he asked, cutting into his burger. "Better than expected. Dr. Kim says she's making progress on understanding boundaries and communication issues." "And Dylan?" "Still radio silent, which is probably for the best." That's when I saw them walk in. Dylan, accompanied by two guys I didn't recognize, scanning the restaurant like they were looking for someone specific. They found me. Dylan approached our table with his companions flanking him. One was tall and thin with sleeve tattoos. The other was shorter but built like a weightlifter. "Dad." "Dylan, you're violating the no-contact agreement by being here." "Actually, I'm not. The agreement says I can't contact Mom. It doesn't say anything about you." Carter set down his beer and studied the three young men with professional interest. "Who are your friends?" "This is Jake and Marcus. They wanted to meet you." Jake, the tall one with tattoos, stepped forward. "Mr. Avery, we need to talk." "About what?" "About the money your son owes us." The bottom fell out of my stomach. I thought that debt was paid. Dylan shifted uncomfortably. There were some additional fees, interest charges, penalty payments. The original $15,000 has grown. "How much has it grown?" Marcus, the weightlifter, answered. $28,000, including this month's VIG. Carter slowly reached for his phone. "Gentlemen, I think this conversation needs to happen somewhere more private." "No," Jake said firmly. "It needs to happen right here, right now. Dylan's been dodging us for 2 weeks, and we're tired of playing games." I looked at my son, seeing him clearly for the first time in months. "You lied to your mother. The gambling debts weren't $15,000. They were more, and they're still growing." "I didn't lie. The original debt was $15,000, but when I couldn't make the payments on time, they added penalties." "What kind of penalties?" 20% monthly interest plus collection fees." Carter whistled low. "Loan sharks." "Jesus, kid, what were you thinking?" Jake interrupted. "He was thinking he could get Mommy and Daddy to bail him out. But Mommy's been cut off and Daddy's playing hardball, so now the debt is our problem to collect." "It's not my debt," I said firmly. "Dylan is an adult who made adult decisions. His gambling problem is not my financial responsibility." "Actually," Marcus said, pulling out his phone, "we think it is." He showed me a series of text messages between Dylan and Laurel. "Your wife promised to cover Dylan's debts. She said the money would keep coming as long as we gave her time to access it without you noticing." I read the messages with growing horror. Laurel hadn't just been paying off Dylan's original debt. She'd been negotiating payment plans for ongoing gambling losses. "When were these sent?" "Last week, after your separation was filed." I looked at Dylan. "You're still gambling." "I had a system. I was going to win it back." "You had a system for sports betting, and you thought you could win back $28,000. "I came close a few times." Carter stood up slowly, his hand resting on his jacket where I knew he kept a concealed weapon. "Gentlemen, I think it's time for you to leave." Jake shook his head. "We're not leaving without a payment plan. Dylan owes us money, and his family is going to pay it." "No," I said, standing up as well. "His family is not going to pay it. Dylan is going to figure out how to handle his own debts." "That's not how this works," Marcus said. "Dylan used your wife as collateral. He told us she had access to family money and would cover his losses. We extended credit based on that guarantee. Then you made a bad business decision. My wife has no legal authority to obligate marital assets for Dylan's debts, especially not during a legal separation." Jake stepped closer. "Legal technicalities don't matter to us, Mr. Avery. What matters is that we're out $28,000, and someone in your family is going to make it right." The restaurant had gone quiet. Other patrons were staring, and I could see the bartender reaching for the phone. "Carter, call the police." "Already did," he replied, showing his phone. "They're on their way." Dylan looked panicked. "Dad, please. These guys don't mess around. If I don't pay them, they'll hurt Mom." "They'll hurt your mother?" The woman you've been manipulating and lying to for months? The woman whose marriage you helped destroy with your gambling addiction? She's still my mother. And she's still my wife, which means protecting her is my job, not yours. I turned to Jake and Marcus. Here's how this is going to work. Dylan is going to get professional help for his gambling addiction. He's going to find a job and start making payments on his debt, and you're going to stay away from my family while he does it. That's not acceptable, Jake said. It's the only option you're getting, because if you threaten my wife, harass my son, or show up at my workplace, I'll make your lives very complicated. You're just an insurance adjuster. I'm an insurance adjuster who specializes in investigating fraud, documenting evidence, and working with law enforcement. I know how to build cases, track financial crimes, and make problems for people who operate outside the law. Carter added his own threat. And I'm a licensed private investigator with 20 years of police experience. Between the two of us, we can make your little loan shark operation very visible to people who prefer it to stay invisible. The sound of sirens was growing louder. Jake and Marcus exchanged glances, then looked at Dylan. You've got 1 week to come up with a payment plan that doesn't involve your family. After that, we start collecting in other ways. They left just as the police arrived. Dylan stood there looking lost and scared. Dad, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to get this bad. Sorry doesn't fix anything, Dylan. You've put your mother in danger, destroyed your parents' marriage, and now you're bringing criminals into our lives. What am I supposed to do? You're supposed to check yourself into a residential gambling addiction program, get a full-time job, and start taking responsibility for the mess you've created. I can't pay back $28,000 on a minimum wage job. Then you better figure out how to earn more than minimum wage, because this problem is yours to solve, not mine. Carter put his hand on my shoulder. Mitchell, maybe you should consider— No, I'm not bailing him out. I'm not enabling this addiction, and I'm not teaching him that his problems become other people's problems when they get too big for him to handle. I looked at Dylan one last time. You want to be an adult? Start acting like one. Get help, get a job, and get your life together. But do it without dragging your mother and me down with you. I left him standing in the restaurant parking lot, talking to the police officers who were taking statements about the incident. The war was just beginning. I drove straight to Dr. Kim's office. Laurel was already there for her individual session, but I convinced the receptionist to let me join them for an emergency family meeting. Mitchell, what's wrong? Laurel asked when I walked into the office. I showed her the text messages that Marcus had displayed on his phone. You promised to pay Dylan's gambling debts, even after we separated, even after we agreed that he needed to solve his own problems. Dr. Kim read the messages with a grim expression. Laurel, we discussed this in our last session. Enabling Dylan's addiction by providing financial support would only make the problem worse. He said they would hurt him if I didn't help. So you decided to lie to me again? To go behind my back and make financial commitments that could bankrupt us? I was scared. You were manipulated, again, by the same person who's been manipulating you for months. I sat down across from both of them. Dylan just showed up at Murphy's Tavern with 2 loan sharks who are demanding $28,000. They threaten to hurt you if he doesn't pay them. Laurel went pale. 28,000, but he said it was only 15. The 15 was the original debt. The 28 includes interest, penalties, and new gambling losses that he's accumulated since we found out about the problem. Dr. Kim leaned forward. Laurel, this is exactly the pattern we've been discussing. Dylan creates a crisis, presents you with a worst-case scenario, and manipulates your maternal instincts to get what he wants. But what if they really hurt him? Then he'll learn that gambling has serious consequences, I said firmly. But we're not going to prevent him from learning that lesson by bailing him out again. You're willing to let our son get hurt? I'm willing to let our son face the consequences of his choices. There's a difference. I pulled out my phone and showed them photos I'd taken of Jake and Marcus. I've already sent these to Carter, who's running background checks. I've also filed a police report about the threats, and I'm hiring a security company to monitor our house for the next few weeks. You think they'll come after us? I think they'll try to pressure us into paying Dylan's debts, but I'm not going to let that happen. Dr. Kim took notes as I explained the situation. What's your plan for Dylan? Dylan checks himself into a residential gambling addiction program within 48 hours, or I cut off all contact with him permanently. He gets a full-time job and starts making payments to these people on his own, and he stays away from both of us until he can prove that he's serious about recovery. That seems harsh, Laurel said quietly. Harsh would be letting him destroy our lives to fund his addiction. This is just consequences. What if he refuses? Then he refuses, but he doesn't get to use us as collateral for his gambling debts anymore. I turned to Dr. Kim. What's your professional opinion? Dylan is exhibiting classic addiction behavior patterns. The lying, manipulation, and escalation are all textbook symptoms. Enabling his addiction by providing financial support will only make it worse. So we cut him off completely? You set firm boundaries and maintain them consistently. Dylan needs to understand that his addiction is his responsibility to manage, not yours to fund. Laurel started crying. He's our son. He's an adult with an addiction who's been manipulating his parents to avoid consequences. The best thing you can do for him is force him to get professional help. I reached across and took Laurel's hand. We can't save Dylan from his addiction. Only he can do that. But we can save ourselves from being destroyed by it. She squeezed my hand. What happens to us? That depends on whether you can stop lying to me and start working with me instead of against me. I want to try. Then prove it. No more secret communications with Dylan. No more financial support without my knowledge. And no more decisions that affect our family without discussing them with me first. What if Dylan gets hurt? Then we'll deal with that when it happens, but we're not going to prevent it by destroying ourselves. Dr. Kim closed her notebook. I think this is a reasonable approach. Laurel, you'll need to work on separating your role as a mother from your role as an enabler. And Mitchell, you'll need to work on rebuilding trust while maintaining appropriate boundaries. Can we do this together? Laurel asked. We can try, I replied, but no more lies. No more secrets, and no more putting Dylan's wants ahead of our marriage. I promise. Don't promise. Just do it. One day at a time, one decision at a time, prove to me that you're choosing our marriage over his addiction. We left Dr. Kim's office with a plan. Laurel would cut off all contact with Dylan until he entered a treatment program. I would handle any further contact with the loan sharks through legal channels. And we would work together to rebuild our marriage while maintaining firm boundaries around Dylan's problems. It sounded simple in theory. In practice, it was about to get much more complicated. 3 days later, Dylan broke into our house. I was at work when the security alarm went off. The monitoring company called to report a break-in, and I raced home to find Dylan in the living room, frantically searching through Laurel's desk. What the hell are you doing? He spun around, his eyes wild and desperate. I need Mom's checkbook. Jake and Marcus gave me until tonight to make a payment, or they're going to hurt her. Get out of my house. Dad, please, I just need $5,000 to buy more time. I said get out. Dylan pulled out his phone and showed me a series of photos. They know where Mom works. They know her schedule. They know which parking garage she uses. The photos showed Laurel leaving her office building, walking to her car, getting into the elevator. Someone had been following her. They're not bluffing, Dad. If I don't pay them something tonight, they're going to grab her. I called Carter immediately. I need you at my house right now. Dylan's here and the loan sharks are escalating. On my way. I turned back to Dylan. You brought criminals into our lives. You used your mother as collateral for gambling debts. And now you're breaking into our house to steal money for more payments. I'm trying to protect her. You're trying to protect yourself. There's a difference. Dylan's facade finally cracked completely. Fine. You want the truth? I've been gambling for 3 years. The debts are more than $28,000. And I used Mom's name as a reference when I opened credit accounts with multiple bookies. The room started spinning. How much more? 47,000 spread across 5 different operations. I sat down hard on the couch. $47,000. I thought I could win it back. I had a system, and it was working for a while. A system for gambling. That was working. Carter arrived and assessed the situation quickly. How bad is it? I showed him Dylan's phone with the photos of Laurel. They're threatening to kidnap my wife because my son owes them $47,000 and used her as collateral. Carter studied the photos. These were taken yesterday. Professional surveillance, multiple angles. This isn't some small-time operation. He turned to Dylan. Who exactly did you borrow money from? Different people. I found them online, through forums and chat rooms. Online gambling rings. Jesus Christ, Dylan. You might as well have borrowed money from the Russian mob. What does that mean? I asked. It means these aren't local loan sharks who rough people up and move on. These are organized criminal enterprises that operate across state lines and don't hesitate to use serious violence. Dylan started crying. I never meant for it to get this bad. I thought I could handle it. You thought you could handle $47,000 in gambling debt spread across multiple criminal organizations. I thought I could win it back. Carter pulled me aside. Mitchell, you need to call the FBI. This is beyond local police jurisdiction. The FBI? Online gambling rings that operate across state lines fall under federal jurisdiction. And if they're threatening to kidnap Laurel, that's a federal crime. I called the FBI field office and explained the situation. They agreed to send agents to the house immediately. While we waited, Carter questioned Dylan about the details of his gambling activities. How many different operations did you borrow from? 5, maybe 6. I lost track. What kind of games? Sports betting mostly. Some poker, some casino games. How did you make payments? Wire transfers, cryptocurrency, cash drops. Carter shook his head. Kid, you're in way over your head. These people don't just break legs when you can't pay. They traffic people, run drugs, and ruin anyone who threatens their operations. What am I supposed to do? You're supposed to cooperate with federal law enforcement and hope they can protect you while they build cases against these organizations. The FBI agents arrived an hour later. Special Agent Jennifer Walsh was a serious woman in her 40s who specialized in online criminal enterprises. Mr. Avery, we're going to need complete cooperation from your son. Names, websites, financial records, communication logs, everything. Dylan provided them with his laptop, phone, and written statements about his gambling activities. How much danger is my wife in? I asked. Significant danger, Agent Walsh replied. These organizations use family members as leverage routinely. We'll need to put Mrs. Avery in protective custody until we can neutralize the immediate threats. For how long? Could be weeks, could be months. Depends on how quickly we can identify and arrest the people making threats. I looked at Dylan, who was sitting at the kitchen table with 2 agents, going through his financial records. This is what your gambling addiction has cost us. Your mother has to go into hiding, our marriage is destroyed, and our family is being threatened by federal criminals. I know, I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix anything. Sorry doesn't pay back $47,000. And sorry doesn't undo the damage you've done to everyone who tried to help you. Agent Walsh interrupted. Mr. Avery, we're going to need you to stay away from your house for the next few days while we process the scene and set up surveillance. Is there somewhere you can stay? I'll stay with Carter. What about Dylan? Dylan can figure out his own accommodations. He's an adult. Dad, please. No. You've used up all your chances, burned all your bridges, and destroyed all your relationships. You're on your own now. I packed a bag and left my own house. leaving Dylan with the federal agents who would be questioning him for the next several hours. The war was over. I had lost everything. But at least I had finally won something. The truth. 6 months later, I was sitting in Attorney Marks's office, signing the final divorce papers. Laurel had spent 3 months in federal protective custody, while the FBI built cases against the gambling rings that Dylan had borrowed money from. When she was finally released, our marriage was beyond repair. The house sale should close next week, Attorney Marks explained. After paying off the remaining mortgage and Dylan's debts, you'll each receive about $35,000. What about Dylan? He completed the residential gambling addiction program and is working full-time at a warehouse. He's making payments to the federal restitution fund, but it'll take him about 15 years to pay off what he owes. And the criminal cases? Ongoing. Dylan's cooperation helped the FBI identify several major online gambling operations. He'll probably have to testify in multiple trials over the next few years. I signed the last document and handed it back to her. So that's it? That's it. You're officially divorced, financially independent, and free to start over. I walked out of the law office and drove to my new apartment across town. It was smaller than the house Laurel and I had shared, but it was mine. No secrets, no lies, no gambling debts hidden in joint accounts. My phone rang as I was unpacking the last box of books. Mitchell? It's Laurel. What do you need? I wanted to thank you. For what? For not bailing Dylan out, for forcing him to get help, for making the hard choices that I couldn't make. How is he? Better. Still struggling, but better. The treatment program helped him understand how his addiction affected everyone around him. Good. Mitchell? Yeah? I'm sorry. For all of it. For lying. For stealing. For choosing Dylan's addiction over our marriage. I know. Do you think... Is there any chance we could try again someday? I looked around my new apartment. Clean, simple, honest. No, Laurel. Some things can't be fixed. I understand. Take care of yourself. You too. I hung up and finished unpacking my books. Outside my window, the city was alive with traffic and noise and people going about their ordinary lives. People who weren't dealing with gambling addictions or federal investigations or marriages destroyed by lies and betrayal. I envied them, but I also pitied them a little. Because they would never know how strong they could be when everything fell apart. They would never know what they were truly capable of when the people they trusted most betrayed them completely. They would never know the strange peace that comes from losing everything and discovering that you're still standing. My phone buzzed with a text message from Carter. Dinner tonight? Murphy's Tavern? I smiled and typed back, sure, but I'm buying. Some things, at least, were worth saving.